The autumn leaves scattered across Oakwood Lane as Sarah Mitchell pulled into her driveway on a crisp September morning in 2023. This quiet street in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, had been her home for nearly 2 decades. The neighborhood had aged like its oak trees, gradually, almost imperceptibly, until one day you realized everything had changed. Sarah stepped out of her car and noticed Mrs. Henderson watering her immaculate garden across the street. They exchanged waves, a ritual unchanged since 2006. That year hung in Sarah's mind like a photograph slightly askew on a wall. You know something's wrong, but you can't quite place what it is. "Morning, Sarah," called Mrs. Henderson, her voice carrying in the still morning air. "Have you heard about the commotion down at the Peterson house? Police cars were there at dawn." Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest. The Peterson house, vacant since 2006, when Elaine Peterson disappeared without a trace. The case that haunted their neighborhood, the mystery that had slowly faded into the background of community consciousness, mentioned less frequently at barbecues and neighborhood watches as the years passed. "No, I hadn't heard," Sarah replied, trying to mask her interest. As a journalist for the local newspaper, she'd covered Elaine's disappearance extensively. It was the story that established her career, and the one she never truly closed. Inside her house, Sarah set her keys on the counter and opened her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating before typing "Elaine Peterson, Winston-Salem" into the search bar. How many times had she performed this search over the years? Hundreds? Thousands? The search results showed nothing new until she refreshed the page. A breaking news headline from the Winston-Salem Journal: "Arrest made in 2006, cold case disappearance." Sarah's phone rang. It was her editor, Mike. "I'm guessing you've seen the news," he said without preamble. "Just now. What happened?" "They've arrested someone for Elaine Peterson's disappearance after 17 years. And Sarah, it's James Cooper." The name hit Sarah like a physical force. James Cooper, the soft-spoken accountant who lived 3 doors down from the Peterson house. The man who had organized the first search party when Elaine went missing. The man whose quotes about community and hope had featured prominently in Sarah's articles. "That's impossible," Sarah whispered. "I need you on this, Sarah. You know the case better than anyone. You know the neighborhood. This is going to be the biggest story Winston-Salem has seen in years." After hanging up, Sarah sat motionless, memories flooding back. Elaine Peterson had been 34 when she disappeared, just 2 years older than Sarah was then. A pharmaceutical sales representative, recently divorced, who had moved to Oakwood Lane for a fresh start. Sarah had interviewed her once for a piece on women entrepreneurs in the area. Elaine had been warm, ambitious, with a laugh that made you feel like you were sharing a private joke. Then, one Tuesday in October 2006, Elaine didn't show up for a meeting. Her house was found undisturbed, coffee cup in the sink, bed neatly made, car in the garage. No signs of struggle, no evidence of plans to leave, simply gone. The investigation had been thorough, but ultimately fruitless. No body was ever found, no compelling suspects were identified. The case gradually cooled, becoming one of those mysteries that defined a community, a shared wound that never quite healed. Sarah pulled out her old notebook from the bottom drawer of her desk. The pages had yellowed, but her handwriting remained sharp and clear. Interview notes, timelines, theories, the anatomy of a disappearance meticulously documented. One name appeared repeatedly throughout her notes: James Cooper. He had been everywhere during those first crucial days, organizing search parties, distributing flyers, speaking to the media, consoling neighbors. Elaine was the kind of neighbor who would bring you soup when you were sick, he had told Sarah. "We won't rest until we find her." Sarah flipped to her notes from a community meeting held 3 weeks after the disappearance. James had spoken passionately about keeping hope alive, but there was a note in the margin of her notebook, circled several times. JC knew about E's pharmaceutical contacts? Check. She couldn't remember what that note meant. Some thread she had meant to pull, but never did. Or perhaps she had followed it and found nothing. After so many years, the details blurred. Sarah grabbed her coat and car keys. She needed to see the Peterson house again, the house that had stood empty for 17 years, a silent monument to an unresolved mystery. As she backed out of her driveway, she noticed unfamiliar cars parked along Oakwood Lane, news vans, unmarked police vehicles. The quiet street was waking up to cameras and questions. Her phone pinged with a text from Mike. "Press conference at 2 p.m. Detective Ramirez leading. He's asking for you specifically." Detective Luis Ramirez. Another name from the past. He had been a junior detective in 2006, assigned to his first major case. Now, apparently, he had never let it go. Just like Sarah. The police station buzzed with activity as Sarah made her way through the familiar corridors. Faces turned to watch her pass, some recognizing her from her byline photo, others simply noting the purposeful stride of someone who belonged. She had spent countless hours here during the initial investigation, developing the relationships that would serve her career for years to come. Detective Luis Ramirez stood at the far end of the room, older now, with strands of grey at his temples. When he saw Sarah, his serious expression softened momentarily. "Mitchell, figured you'd be here before the press conference." He gestured toward an empty interview room. "Got a few minutes?" Inside the room, Ramirez closed the door and sighed heavily. 17 years, he said almost to himself. This case was my first major assignment. Never could shake it. "Why Cooper?" Sarah asked, cutting straight to the question burning inside her. He was helping. He organized searches. Ramirez's expression remained carefully neutral. "That's often how it works, isn't it? The ones who insert themselves into the investigation." But there was never any evidence connecting him to Elaine. "There wasn't," Ramirez agreed, "until 3 weeks ago, when a construction crew broke ground for a new development out near Clemens. They found human remains." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "Elaine?" Ramirez nodded. "DNA confirmed it last week. We kept it quiet while we gathered evidence." He leaned forward. "The remains were wrapped in a very specific type of industrial plastic, used by only a few companies in North Carolina in 2006, one of which was Meridian Accounting, where Cooper worked as financial controller." Sarah's mind raced. All those years of wondering, of imagining scenarios, and Elaine had been buried in the ground less than 15 miles away. "There's more," Ramirez continued. "We executed a search warrant on Cooper's property yesterday. In his garage, we found a collection of pharmaceutical samples, preserved, tagged with dates, the kind of samples a pharmaceutical rep might carry." "Trophies," Sarah whispered. "We believe so, yes. But why? What was the connection between them?" Ramirez hesitated. "That's where it gets complicated. And that's where you might be able to help us. You covered this case from the beginning. You knew the neighborhood, the dynamics. I didn't see anything suspicious about Cooper. None of us did. Sometimes we don't see what's right in front of us," Ramirez said, "especially when it doesn't fit our expectations. Cooper was quiet, helpful, respected. But we've been looking into his past. There were incidents, nothing that resulted in charges, but there were complaints from female colleagues at previous workplaces, claims of harassment, unwanted attention." Sarah's mind flashed back to her old notes, the cryptic reminder about Elaine's pharmaceutical contacts. She had interviewed Cooper multiple times during the initial investigation. Had there been signs she missed? "We think Cooper became fixated on Elaine," Ramirez continued. "Neighbors reported he would offer to help with home repairs, bring her mail in when she traveled, small things that seemed neighborly at the time. And then what? She rejected him. We found emails on an old hard drive in his basement. He'd asked her to dinner. She declined, mentioned she was seeing someone. The emails get increasingly agitated after that." Sarah thought back to 2006. Had Elaine mentioned dating anyone? Not to her. But then, they weren't close friends. Just a professional acquaintance, a neighbor, a woman whose absence had shaped Sarah's career and life. "The press conference is in 30 minutes. Ramirez said. "We'll release the basic facts, the discovery of remains, the arrest. But not all the details. There are aspects of this case that don't quite fit yet." As they stood to leave, Sarah hesitated. "The Peterson house? It's been empty all these years. Who's been paying the property taxes, the maintenance?" "That's one of those details that doesn't quite fit," Ramirez said. "A trust has been maintaining the property, established anonymously in November 2006, 1 month after Elaine disappeared. Outside the interview room, the station continued its bustling activity. Officers moved with renewed purpose. A cold case turning hot generated its own energy, its own momentum. Sarah stepped outside for a moment of fresh air before the press conference. The autumn sky was cloudless, the kind of piercing blue that seemed impossible to reconcile with the darkness of what she'd just learned. Her phone rang. "Mrs. Henderson." "Sarah, there are people all over the neighborhood," the older woman said, her voice tight with anxiety. "They're saying James Cooper killed Elaine. Is it true?" "I can't confirm anything yet, Mrs. Henderson. There's a press conference soon. It doesn't make sense. James shoveled my walkway every winter. He drove me to doctor's appointments when my arthritis got bad." "I know. And Sarah, there's something else. The day before Elaine disappeared, I saw them arguing on her driveway. I never told the police. It didn't seem important then. James was helping her unload groceries, and then they were arguing. I couldn't hear what about." Sarah felt a chill despite the warm day. "I'll need to tell Detective Ramirez about this." "Of course. I never thought, all these years living across the street from—" As Sarah hung up, she noticed a familiar figure walking toward the police station. Dr. Rachel Chen, the county medical examiner. Their eyes met, and Dr. Chen nodded in recognition. "I heard you'd be covering this," Dr. Chen said as they entered the building together. "Full circle for both of us." Dr. Chen had been new to the position in 2006, the Peterson case one of her first major investigations, an investigation that had stalled due to lack of evidence. Now, finally, she had a body to examine, a truth to uncover. "The remains tell a story," Dr. Chen said quietly as they walked. "Not just about how she died, but about how someone tried to hide what they did. The care taken with the burial suggests planning, not panic. Whoever did this thought they had created the perfect hiding place. Until progress and construction revealed it," Sarah added. "That's often how these old cases break, not through detective work, but through chance. A development project, a flood exposing old ground, a renovation revealing what walls have kept hidden." As they approached the conference room, already filling with reporters and cameras, Sarah thought about the quiet street where she and Elaine had both lived, all the secrets it had kept, all the normal days that had passed while something terrible lay buried not far away. The neighborhood would never be the same after today, and neither, she realized, would her understanding of the story she thought she knew so well. The neighborhood had transformed overnight. News vans lined Oakwood Lane, reporters stationed at strategic points, cameras capturing the unremarkable facade of James Cooper's home, a tidy colonial with green shutters and carefully maintained flower beds. Yellow police tape created a perimeter that neighbors observed from porches and driveways, their expressions a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. Sarah's article on the press conference had run on the front page that morning. The basic facts were now public. Elaine Peterson's remains discovered at a construction site. James Cooper arrested based on forensic evidence. A 17-year-old mystery potentially solved. The community was reeling, attempting to reconcile the helpful neighbor they thought they knew with the monster police now described. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something remained hidden. The press conference had been carefully managed, with Detective Ramirez revealing only what served the prosecution's narrative. When asked about motive, he had been evasive. "The investigation is ongoing." Now, 2 days after Cooper's arrest, Sarah sat at her kitchen table reviewing her notes. Mrs. Henderson's revelation about the argument had been added to the official record, but it didn't explain the level of violence that Dr. Chen had hinted at during their brief conversation. A knock at her door startled her. Through the peephole, she recognized Daniel Peterson, Elaine's younger brother, who had appeared occasionally during the initial search efforts before retreating from public view as the case went cold. "I saw your article," he said when she opened the door. He looked older than his 40-something years, grief having carved permanent lines around his eyes. "You've been covering this from the beginning." "Please, come in," Sarah said, leading him to her living room. "I'm so sorry about Elaine, about all of this." Daniel nodded absently, his gaze drifting to the window that overlooked Oakwood Lane. 17 years of not knowing, 17 years of imagining every scenario, and now, he trailed off. "The not knowing is its own kind of pain," Sarah offered quietly. "Yes." Daniel turned to face her. "But I'm not sure knowing is better, especially when what we're being told doesn't make sense." Sarah leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean?" "This narrative they're creating about James Cooper, a rejected suitor who became violent. It's too simple. There was more to Elaine's life, more to what happened." "What aren't they saying, Daniel?" He hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small notebook. Elaine kept records of everything. It was how her mind worked, organized, methodical. After she disappeared, police found her work calendar, her personal planner. But they never found this. He handed Sarah the notebook. The cover was weathered, the spiral binding slightly crushed. Inside, pages of neat handwriting documented meetings, conversations, observations. "Where did you get this?" Sarah asked, already scanning the entries. "She mailed it to me a week before she disappeared, with a note saying if anything happened to her, I should look at what she'd discovered about Meridian accounting." Sarah flipped to entries from September 2006, just before Elaine vanished. The pages detailed conversations with physicians on her sales route, notes about prescription patterns, and then increasingly urgent observations about Meridian accounting and a client list that included several pain management clinics. "She noticed it during a sales call," Daniel explained. "A pain clinic prescribing unusual amounts of opioids. When she checked other clinics on her route, she saw the same pattern. All clients of Meridian, where Cooper managed the books." Sarah's mind raced. "An opioid distribution network. In 2006, before the crisis was widely recognized." Elaine was connecting the dots, Daniel confirmed. The pharmaceutical company she worked for manufactured legitimate pain medications, but she realized some doctors were over-prescribing dramatically, and Meridian Accounting was handling the finances for these clinics, helping obscure the paper trail. Did she confront Cooper about this? I think she must have. The last entry mentions planning to speak with him as a neighbor first, before taking her concerns further. Sarah thought back to Mrs. Henderson's account of the argument on Elaine's driveway. Not a rejected romantic advance, but a confrontation about something much bigger, something worth killing to keep hidden. "Have you shown this to Detective Ramirez?" Daniel shook his head. "I came to you first. This isn't just about James Cooper. There are doctors named in there, clinic administrators, people who've spent 17 years believing they got away with it. I needed someone I could trust before this becomes part of the official investigation and potentially disappears." Sarah understood his caution. If Cooper was part of a larger network, there could be powerful people involved, perhaps even connections to law enforcement. The story was no longer about a single predator hiding behind a neighborly facade. It was about systematic corruption that had festered for nearly 2 decades. "We need to document everything before turning it over," Sarah said decisively. "I have contacts at the state level, people who can ensure this is investigated properly." As they worked through the notebook, other pieces fell into place. The trust maintaining Elaine's house, likely established by conspirators to keep the property from being sold and potentially revealing evidence. The specific location where Elaine was buried, not random, but land that was owned by a development company connected to one of the clinics in her notes. By evening, they had compiled a comprehensive file. Sarah called her editor, explaining enough to convey the seriousness without revealing all the details. Then she reached out to an FBI contact from a previous investigation, arranging a meeting for the following morning. As Daniel prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "You know what haunts me most? All these years I imagined her last moments filled with terror, but now I see something different. I see my sister standing her ground, confronting something wrong, refusing to look away. That was who she truly was." Sarah watched from her window as Daniel walked to his car, the streetlights of Oakwood Lane illuminating his path. The quiet street had held its secrets for 17 years, secrets that went far beyond one man's violence, extending into a network of greed and corruption that had contributed to a national crisis. The next morning, Sarah drove to the federal building for the meeting she'd arranged. The notebook sat securely in her bag, photocopies and digital scans already stored in multiple locations. As she passed the Peterson house, she noticed the for sale sign freshly planted in the yard. Daniel moving forward, finally able to release the physical space his sister had once occupied. At the end of the street, Sarah glimpsed Mrs. Henderson in her garden again, planting bulbs that wouldn't bloom until spring. Life continuing, changing, revealing its buried truths in time. The arrest of James Cooper had indeed left the neighbors of Oakwood Lane speechless, but not for the reasons initially reported. The truth was more complex, more far-reaching than a single act of violence, and Sarah knew that her work, like Elaine's, was just beginning. The story that had shaped her career 17 years ago would now define its next chapter as she pursued the full truth that Elaine Peterson had died to expose.